Welcome, everyone, to our prompt and context engineering session. I'm your host, MikeyAce, and I'm joined by my co-host, SeeingBlue. I am an MACP mentor, a game developer, 3D artist with over 11 years of experience creating games for mobile and VR. A big part of my week is spent teaching and helping creators bring their ideas to life.
Hi guys, and I am SeeingBlue. I have been in tech support and programming for 15 years, spent the last three as an MHCP mentor, and I've spent the last two integrating AI into my workflows. Mikey, what kind of stuff are we going to be learning today?
So by the end of this workshop, you'll have a better understanding of prompt structure, context windows, rot, clash, and poison, and how context engineering can help you get better results from AI.
That sounds like a lot of fun. So, Mikey, how would you explain to someone what prompt engineering is?
That's a great question because prompt engineering is basically how clearly you give AI instructions. So think of it like I like to compare it, actually, I like to compare it to hiring like a contractor to renovate, let's say, your kitchen. If I
Mhm.
explain what I want, the style, the layout, the materials, and the details, I'm much more likely to get the result I pictured. But if I'm very vague, I'm giving the contractor a lot of freedom to make those decisions for me. And the final result may not look anything what I had in mind.
Right, exactly. So sounds like prompt engineering is a set of instructions, whether we're giving it to an agent or we're giving it to our contractors. Prompts have a structure to them. And while the industry doesn't necessarily agree on the exact words to describe the parts of a prompt, I've got a few here that are generally agreed upon. And so I want to kind of go over those with you guys. And the first one is going to be the task. So basically what the agent needs to do. And this could be as simple as answer a question or do some research or do some math or any number of things. And sometimes it helps if we add a little bit of context to those instructions. So depending on what the situation is, if it's a game development, it needs to be information that the model doesn't already know, obviously. So it could be something like the specific game we're working on, the files, or any of the decisions that we've made about the development process. And sometimes, depending on the project, again, constraints can be super useful to include in our prompts. And this is not necessarily a ban list, but more so a requirement or limitations that the model should either work to achieve or not cross. And then we could also include some an output format. So if like we're a data engineer, you could ask for formats in JSON or comma separated values. For game developers, we could ask for outputs in HTML single files. Maybe even the portrait mode could be a format output or an output format. And then examples are really good to use as well because they come with a ton of information that the model already knows just by simply giving it a name like Plants vs. Zombies.
So usually when I'm prompting, it can be helpful to ask the AI to summarize what it understood before it starts. So, for example, this creates a quick checkpoint between your instructions and the final result. You can see what details it picked up, what it may have misunderstood, and whether anything important is missing. If something is wrong, you can correct it before the AI spends time executing the prompt. That gives you a better chance of getting the result you actually intended.
Yeah, that's some really good information. But prompt engineering it doesn't end at the prompt structure. So what is your context window? I like to think of the context window as a sheet of paper. And on this sheet of paper is my conversation that I've been having with the AI. Now, the sheet of paper can only hold so much information, so it's of a fixed size. And the longer my conversation goes, the more full that paper gets. Honestly, the worse results I end up getting from the model. So let's take a look at the example we have on screen here. If we take a look at the top line, it says turn one or prompt the first prompt. You could also think of it as your prompt as well. So in the first prompt, we give the model our original spec. So in one prompt, we give it everything that we want it to achieve in this build. And then turn two, turn three, turn four. By turn four or prompt four, we're changing our mind and we're asking it for to make it top down instead. A few more prompts later, it invents a function that doesn't exist. We spend some prompts trying to undo that. And a few more prompts, we change our mind and decide that we now want to make it a side scroller. So by prompt 23, the entire conversation that we just had to the model is getting sent in every prompt. So every turn, the previous conversation is getting rolled up, resent to the model. The model's reevaluating on that information, sending your response, you're replying to that. The whole thing's rolled up again. The process repeats. By turn 30, you've got quite a big context window. And once those windows get too big, it starts to create problems for us. So, Mikey, can you tell us a little bit about how we can maintain those context windows?
Yeah, sure. I think this is a great way to take a look at this issue. To keep the context fresh, you can start a new chat. You can ask the AI to summarize the important information first, then paste that summary into a new chat. So, think of it like this. You're giving someone directions. A long list of details will be very hard to remember, but a short, clear summary is much easier to follow.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Thank you for those tips, Mikey. So the next thing we want to take a look at is what happens when you fail to maintain your context window. Okay, so let's take a look at what happens if we fail to maintain our context window properly. The first one is rot, and it says more in the window, worse recall. And that's what I was talking about with our piece of paper analogy. The more information on that piece of paper, the more full that paper gets, the worse the model starts to perform. It starts to lose the information that was in the middle. And so we saw in our example that we had some contradictory information. That contradictory information actually starts to create clash. Because now, not only do we have rot occurring, once we reach more than about, I like to keep my context at about 50%. So just real quick, on most models, most software, somewhere you can either enable or find a measurement of your context window in any given chat. And it's going to tell you just how close you are to filling that piece of paper up. I like to keep that at about 50%. So once you get to 50%, start thinking about moving to a new chat, compacting this chat, ending the conversation, starting a new one. You don't really want to go far past that 50%. So, because then that does create the rot that we've talked about. So when the rot starts to occur and you've got clash in the middle of your context, it's going to start getting confused. And then you've got errors that occurred somewhere along the process that you've corrected, and now your context is rotted and fallen apart, and you've got poison, which is basically a fact that you can't get the model to forget, and it keeps coming back a few prompts later. Mikey, you've ever had these kinds of problems?
I definitely did when I first started using the AI. One good example could be when I kept using the same chat to build and revise the game over many prompts. Rot started happening when the chat became so long that the AI began losing track of some of my earlier decisions. Clash happened when newer instructions conflicted with things I had told it earlier, so it wasn't sure which direction to follow. Poison happened when one misunderstanding or bad assumption stayed in the conversation and started influencing future prompts. So it was causing the AI to keep repeating the same mistake. At that point, starting a fresh chat with a short summary of the correct decisions would have helped reset everything.
Yep, you're absolutely correct. And that's good information. So up to this point, we've talked about prompt engineering. Now we're going to take everything that we've learned and we're going to bolt a term called context engineering on top of it. So nothing that we've talked about up to this point actually changes. Instead, it just complements what we're about to show you. So what is context engineering? Well, it's not a longer prompt. It's a file, it's a fresh chat. It's deciding what the model knows before you prompt it. So up to this point, we have been prompting in the chat alone. And so everything that we told the chat gets lost when we start a new chat, or we have to compact it into a brief if we want to carry the conversation into a new chat. If we run into any of the issues we described, like rock clash and poison, it causes, we're gonna lose context um, by changing chats. It happens naturally. So the best way to keep you and your model on track and headed in the right direction is to create a file that defines everything the model doesn't already know. And we're going to take a look at the example of one of these files in just a moment. But before we do, Mikey, can you tell us a little bit about what you might put in this file or what you might leave out of this file?
Yeah, sure. So when you're doing context engineering, the goal is to give the AI the information it actually needs, not everything you can think of. So include things it can't know on its own, for example, like your preferences or specific rules. I recommend being concrete, for example, like saying I want to have my player have one hit and they're out, or the player only gets one life, no scrolling. Leave out generic instructions like use 3.js best practices because the AI already knows that. It also helps to include a section for things the AI already tried that didn't work, so it knows not to repeat the same mistakes. And instead of giving it a huge list of do nots, focus more on clearly describing what you do want.
Some really good information. Thank you for that, Mikey. And lastly, a file the AI isn't pointed at is not context. It's just a file. So what that means, the models need to have a reference to this context file that we're talking about every turn in every new chat. And some software and some models do this differently. Some software has a set of instructions that let you point to any file. Some models automatically look for files like claude.md, agents.md, or gemini.md. So you're going to want to find out which way is the best to instruct your model so that you can make sure that it is always loading your context file every chat, every turn. So Mikey, I think we've got some demos to take a look at.
Yeah, so here's the free version of ChatGPT Codex. I wanted to see what would happen if someone gave a really simple prompt. And the prompt that we used in this example is I want to build a tower defense game. So again, in my head, I was picturing something much more specific, but I never actually told the AI what that was. So you can see here now, if I hit the HTML, right, you can see that it made a game. And as you can see here, what it gave me wasn't that bad. It actually worked. It looked like a real game, but it was very generic because my prompt was very generic. It gave me one long road, as you can see. And again, if we were to play this, you'll see there's simple enemies. And while I was expecting more of a lane-based tower defense game, similar to some popular games that I've played, but since I left out those details, the AI had to fill in the blanks for me. But Blue, considering what you're seeing here, like, what do you think the AI had to decide on its own because I didn't give it enough directions? And what stands out to you?
Well, it is surprisingly complete. It looks like it works just like you would expect a tower defense game to work. Looks like there's a lot of features to it. So overall, I'm fairly impressed with what it was able to do. But just like you said, it isn't what you imagined. And ultimately, if it's not what you wanted, then it's a waste of tokens. And so now you've either got to start over or you've got to continue the conversation in order to make it something that you do want, right?
Exactly.
So I think we've got another similar example where we just give it just a little bit more context and see just how big of a difference that makes.
Yeah, sure. So, okay, so here's my second prompt. So after seeing the results from the first one, I realized I needed to be more specific. So this time I said, I want to make a tower defense game, but I want to make it be lane-based in the style of Plants vs. Zombies. So by giving the AI a clear reference, I gave it a much better idea of the game that I had in my mind. The prompt took a few minutes to process, But when it finished, and you'll see in just a moment, as you can see here, the result was much closer to my original vision. It gave me a much stronger starting point to build from. So, Blue, what do you think about the difference this more detailed prompt made?
So I think we definitely got a little closer to what we were envisioning, right? And it didn't take a whole lot to get us there. You can see in your prompt that we used some of our prompt structure. We definitely have a task that's build a game. We have some context that's tower defense. We have and lanes based, you could say, and we have an example that's Plants versus Zombies. And with those things, that's all we needed. And we got, honestly, it looks good. It looks a little more complete than the last one. But most importantly, it is the game that more closely to what we envisioned, right? Now, the big problem here is we still need to make changes to this game. This is just the first prompt. This is only 5 waves. So if you wanted to continue development on this game, you're going to have to continue the chat. The problem is you don't have any context to carry over to a new chat. As you continue developing this game, you have to maintain your context from session to session. You don't have any anchor. So I want to take just a moment and show you guys an example of what it might look like to employ context engineering, where we have an actual file on disk, and that's going to allow us to maybe not necessarily produce a better game right out the gate, but at least we'll be coming from a more stable foundation. To continue the development through multiple turns and multiple chats. So now, before we get to the actual context file, I want to show you a video that I had made. This is I want to build a tower defense prompt, but this was done in Claude Code paid version. And I used Sonnet 5, which is comparable to the model that Mikey was using for his. So in this example, what I want to show is basically that with the same prompt, I want to build a tower defense game. Within 10 minutes, I basically had a real similar game. So that goes to show that it's not necessarily the model or the money that you put in. It really does come down to the context that you can build, the information the model doesn't know, but you can supply it, right? So now that we've seen that Claude pretty much produces the same content when we get as close to apples as we can, let's take a look at what difference using a context file can do for us. Okay, so here we have Claude Code paid again. This time we're in my chat, and I have the same prompt. I want to build a tower defense game. Except when I created this chat, I launched it in a folder that contained a markdown file that I had created before I ever sent this prompt. So if we open this markdown file and we take a look at the contents, we can see a few things happening in here. So I defined what this file is and what this project is. I defined what the core loop means to me. I defined any hard constraints that I wanted the game to follow. Hard constraints were things like a single self-contained index.html, 3.js, portrait only, gray box only. So, we're trying to hit those prototype requirements for the competition. Also, decided I wanted to establish my own win, lose, and reset states. I learned early on that balance was going to be an issue, so I wanted to make sure that I wanted the model to make some effort to be able to balance the game on its own. As Mikey was saying earlier, we always want to ask the model, at the very least, what it's assuming. Instead of it assuming, I like to set some starting numbers that are important to me. Starting numbers could be a number of things, like at the max HP a player starts with, how much damage they do when they hit another player, how many points a player gets when they score a basket. So any of those numbers that you don't define, the model will assume. Also had a list of things that I didn't want the model to get into. So these are like my limits, basically. Now, these last two sections, I didn't fill these out at all. None of this I wrote. And as a matter of fact, the only things that were here originally were the title, ruled out, and current state. And the model essentially knew what to do with these. With the ruled out, as we saw Mikey mention a while back, we want to keep a list of anything that we found not to work so that it doesn't get repeated in the future. And this is exactly the model doing that. So as it's developing the game, it found things that didn't work. And so it just made a list of those. So any models that operate in this project in the future don't hit those same problems, repeat the same mistakes, burn the same tokens again. And then we like to have the model keep an update of its progress in the context file as well. So develop the file, dropped it in the folder, sent the same prompt Mikey did. We're still on Sonnet 5 Max. And let's take a look at what we got. So it ends up being quite a bit different, which is fine. Now, is it better? Honestly, you could be the judge of that. I don't necessarily want to claim that it is better, but the main takeaway here is that as I decide to continue working on this game, I now have a concrete file for the model to work with from chat to chat, and that's the real big takeaway here. Oh gosh, they're going to get me, Mikey.
So, question for you, Blue. How much did spending extra time on that pre-production with this context engineering help you communicate your vision to the AI and that it got you closer to what you wanted and ultimately built the game faster?
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth the time spent. And it may not be immediately rel or visible in the short time, but it would definitely pay off for you in the long run. All right, Mikey, go ahead and take us home.
So today we learned what prompt structure is, how a context window works, what rot, clash, and poison could look like, and finally, what context engineering is. Ultimately, the big takeaway is that better prompts and cleaner context can help the AI understand your vision more clearly and give you better results. So, Blue, before we wrap up, is there anything you'd like to add?
Absolutely. So just remember, guys, that done is just a hypothesis. You want to open your builds, and you want to play it after every prompt. You want to name the one thing that the model got wrong, and then go ahead and reiterate.
Okay. Well, we really appreciate you joining us today. Have fun experimenting, keep creating, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye, everyone.